As Nigeria's foreign currency shortage seems to worsen, the effects of the situation are being felt outside of the country. Businesses in Africa's largest economy that rely on imports have been cut off by their foreign suppliers, who are rejecting letters of credit and refusing to deliver goods without payment. Foreign suppliers are now demanding cash transfers into escrow accounts in place of letters of credit as faith in the Nigerian banking system continues to plummet. This is piling pressure on businesses as they resort to the parallel market to source forex. During his screening, Yemi Cardoso, now officially the Central Bank of Nigeria governor, said his top priority was to clear the bank's backlog of unsettled foreign exchange obligations to local lenders, which he estimated could be as high as $7 billion. Reportedly, the CBN has not settled forward contracts since February of this year. Joining me on this conversation is Gospel Obele, Chief Economist for Streetnomics. Gospel, it's good to see you again.
Thank you, Felu. Thank you for having me today.
So let's start with Dr. Yemi Cardoso when he was facing the Senate this past week, and he estimated that the CBN has an unsettled foreign exchange backlog of about $7 billion. So we start from there. Gospel, how did we get here? How did we end up owing so much? Some even put the number at even $10 billion, as it may be.
Yes, first of all, there's been a lot of poor management of monetary policies or use of monetary policy as a tool in many cases to drive currency stability and, economic growth and development in one way or the other. And in many cases as well, the financial system has crippled in previous months when it comes to supporting local borrowing, lending, payouts, bailouts, and all the like. So in many cases, the central bank have had to also find ways to raise finances. And these loans and other programs that it's gotten itself into has required it to meet some series of obligations. And when you juxtapose that with local pressure and poor management locally, you have the situation we're in today. And it's quite consistent also with the fiscal authority in terms of, in many cases, you have new government or new institutions trying to take over from where previous institutions stopped. But then you now have a heap of, or a pile of, backlog of, commitments that must be dealt with, for us to even make progress in the first place. So it's largely what the state of play, has presented itself. And it clearly means that the new central bank governor and his new team as well have a lot to deal in terms of even trying to find the balancing in the first place to take up on the reform that they need to take on.
All right, so let's look at this decision by foreign suppliers. We're not sure how widespread it is just as of yet, but their demand now is no more letters of credit. We're not sure when the CBN will go ahead and pay us what you owe us. So pay cash, transfer cash into escrow accounts. We know that this is now adding a layer of pressure on the CBN, but also most importantly, it's adding another layer of pressure on Nigerian businesses who need inputs from abroad. What do you read into this new development in terms of these foreign suppliers rejecting our letters of credit? What does that tell us?
Yes, so I mean, it borders heavily on investors' confidence in the real sector and in facilitating efficient transactions across borders. This is going to impact heavily on our trade position and balance of payments going forward, because it means that the very basic level documentations that are required to facilitate trade, is currently at risk. Currently at risk of foreign exchange dynamics, currently at risk of Nigerians and businesses not being able to even meet up payment needs, payment expectations rather, the concerns around the stability of the local economy in the first place, and also generally how fragments in how the global economy has evolved in recent times when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war and all that, and how that has led to lots of fragments in the trade ecosystem. That technically means that suppliers across Europe and everywhere in the world right now are bringing up new restrictions, new trade restrictions, and that's also impacting on local business and all that. And one of which we see right now is happening right now across on the conditions of letters of credit. So what it means to a large extent is that Nigerians businesses are going to be heavily restricted, and FX is going to be heavily impacted when it comes to this. But secondly, there are also signs to show the level of fragmentation that the World Trade Organization has warned against more recently in policies that are being driven by developed markets, against developing markets and even amongst developed markets themselves that are not so healthy to achieve the core objective of trade in the first place. Going forward will be that interventions have to be made, by the president and all those involved in foreign policy, trade policy, and the likes, to restore investors' confidence in these areas and ensure that new trade policies are being done from the angle of better levels of economic integration and inclusion to ensure that countries are benefiting from those trade itself.
Yeah.
As the case may be going forward. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a multi-layered kind of situation we find here. And of course, as I said earlier, we're not sure how widespread the rejection of letters of credit from Nigeria is. But in terms of the implications for the real economy, for Nigerians themselves, we've looked at it. You've talked about the fragmentation of the global economy, something the World Trade Organization headed by Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala has warned against. We've talked about it in terms of even the economy. But let's talk about what it means for Nigerians in terms of Naira and Kobo, in terms of cost of goods in the markets. What do we expect to see if this is a trend that continues and continues to even spread even more? How does this impact the everyday Nigerian?
Yes, first and foremost will be that we're very heavy on imported inflation, importing goods and services. We have a taste for foreign produce in the context, and also be the fact that we export a lot of raw materials and import a lot of semi-processed or end value products. We also see that by default, Nigerians are very dependent on imported goods and services. So if you don't have the necessary letters of credit to facilitate that exchange, it may impact on volume imports to start with. And once the impact is being felt on volume imports, that would also impact on already available inventories locally, to meet local demand. And that may also lead to some form of increased prices. Because once suppliers locally cannot secure supply from counterparts abroad, it now means that there's going to be a risk of supply in the future, and that's number one. Number two, lots of small businesses who are already facilitating trade, and based on the way things are right now, they're already exposed. They're already exposed in the export market and export window. Now, not being able to facilitate easy letters of credit further, positions them, further exposes them, and that would impact on the volume or the value positioning of the balance of payments and all that. And lots of businesses may not be able to thrive in the mid to long term, especially businesses who are involved in most of these export engagements. So the truth is, as much as we don't know how far this narrative has gone or has spread, government also needs to take action, because the idea or the perception that it already exists already creates a local problem itself. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
So there's need to deal with that perception, with that media argument, and even with that the actual risks that involve from limiting letters of credit and all that. So it's a very sensitive conversation, again, because of how our economy has been positioned over time to work. So if we were people who consume lots of local goods and local products, heavily, and we've been able to secure finished products for ourselves locally, this won't be much of an issue. However, may impact on our revenue mobilization as well. In other ways you want to look at it.
Okay, so, and that's where I want us to really go, because of a narrative, a conversation, and the ideas. Now, there are concerns about the inability of the CBN to honor its obligations since February 2023, and that's what reports are telling us was really the last time the CBN did that. So banks opened letters of credit on the back of the CBN's forward contracts to businesses, which then used them to buy goods from foreign suppliers. Now there are speculations that there's a backlog of around 3 billion yet to be cleared. Then we're hearing some 2.5 billion, and then from Yemi Cardoso himself, now hearing that this might be 7 billion. Others are even saying it's possibly 10 billion as well. But at a time when Folashodun Shonubi was acting as the CBN governor, he said that the CBN would clear some of the backlog within 2 weeks. So it's been more than 2 weeks. Now there's a substantive governor at the CBN who has promised that this situation is also his top priority. Between then and now, was there any movement? Did we even see that there was any attempt, genuine attempt by the CBN to start getting a handle on this situation?
Yeah, I think conversations had already started, because it was the exchange rate, if you notice, within the window was really at risk of many of these dynamics, this market movement. So most likely conversations had started. Again, most likely because at the heart of the change of the central bank leadership. And let's not forget that the change of central bank leadership happened across board. That's the central bank governor and the other executive 5 deputy governors. That was a comprehensive change across board. And that would require lots and lots of hold off, on conversations that are happening. It's going to affect handover as well, and also prioritizing of engagement, So, for instance, the new leadership has probably 1 or 2, 3 line items they need to get out of the table, and we can't tell exactly how much of alignment we have, in context to the last administration of the central bank governorship that just left. So that lag window may also impact on our commitment to quickly turn this around, and also looking at how the economy is faring at the moment and what are priorities for the fiscal policy, fiscal executives as well, may also impact on that lag window. So what we're trying to say at the end of the day is stakeholders who are grossly affected with this have to begin to rethink how to engage and possible way out for themselves to start with, pending to where the backlog are probably been taken care of, and when officially being restated that these letters of credit can now pass through. Again, we're talking on the assumption that it's not yet a full-blown narrative, but the fact that it's a narrative already existing out there already creates a perception risk of this already, this happening, and actions need to be taken immediately.
So let's widen this a little bit, because apart from the pressure on the forex markets, which has its own implications, we've also seen the pass through to inflation. And there are economists who are saying inflation has not even yet peaked, and that the inflationary pressures we are seeing now are just the beginning of what's to come. I know Nigerians don't want to hear that this is just the tip of the iceberg, but Gospel, what do you think? How do you think, or how do you see things as they stand right now? Are we just at the beginning of even tougher times ahead for Nigerians when it comes to inflation?
Well, to be very honest, there are a lot of moving parts. To start with the positive, you have it looks like, emphasis on looking like there's an emerging strong economic team with experienced executives who understand the language and interest of the fiscal authority. So that's to say that we expect more collaboration, and that collaboration should facilitate speed, give or take. And meaning again that you expect institutions to comply almost immediately, and because of that strong level buying across board, that it seems like they have. So we're expecting that all of these movements and dynamics of events will impact on inflation quickly. Not to say as well that the forecasts are not true. Baseline, those forecasts are likely to happen, meaning that we are still yet to get to the very, very, very worst end of the inflationary crisis we face. However, the pace at which we get to that situation, or how realistic that situation will be, is a function of the pace at which the current government facilitates collaboration to avert the risk we are currently faced with. All right, so it's actually a 50-50 conversation, in my own opinion. But I agree that we've not yet even got to the worst end of inflation. And probably this is just the beginning of so many other things to unfold, because the new administration still has a lot of alignment work to do. Yeah. But I don't know how fast to be able to move to fix the local issues, which will then help to avert lots of the risk and impact on the everyday Nigerian.
So we're going to go a little bit deeper into that, because it really does seem like it's a Herculean task at this point to curb Nigeria's inflation. And we've spoken about options. We've spoken about the overlap between monetary and fiscal actions from the CBN. We've spoken about the fiscal space that the government may have, even if borrowing is truly an option for this government at all. But let's start with the CBN. What options do you think are available for the Cardoso-led CBN when it comes to tackling inflation? Then when you expand it, especially on the monetary side, that is, but then when you expand it to the government as well, there are those who are saying borrowing is really not an option at this point in time. We heard this morning as well, Taiwo Oyedele talking about increasing taxes on wealthier Nigerians to be able to get more revenue and, of course, meet up to this 18% tax to GDP ratio. What are the options we're looking at from the CBN and then into the larger Tinubu administration?
Yeah, I mean, those options are valid based on the intel that they currently have from the Tax Reforms Committee and the Central Bank Governor. From the Central Bank beat, I would expect a lot of collaboration with the fiscal authority, because that was one of the major things that really brought us to the level of crisis we are in right now. All right, so, and there has to be a very strong strategic synergy, not just a political synergy, excuse me. So that strategic synergy would really, really go a long way to facilitate the pace at which reforms are being executed, like I mentioned in the first place. But more importantly for me, within the core monetary blocks, will be that there is need for us to really prioritize the fact that inflation and the dynamics and movement of inflation right now are not only monetary driven. We've seen how letters of credit, we've seen how full subsidy conversations, we've seen how even naira scarcity in the previous month and all that. And the unification of markets, the attempt to unify markets in terms of parallel and official exchange markets have impacted on the cost of living crisis or impacted on the very basic dynamics Nigerians need to get by on a daily basis, which technically in this case is what we find in the inflation case, impacting on food, energy, and all that. So what I would suggest is, trying to take a look past the goalpost of interest rates to look at what else alongside interest rates can we put on the table to reduce, number one, the cost of living impact and, by extension, inflation in Nigeria. And to be like I said, I don't see the central bank governor being able to pull this off alone as an apex institution lead. There's a need to work with the Minister of Finance, which I think they're already getting that going, and the presidency as well, to be able to have that both monetary and non-monetary mix, as a drive towards bringing down the inflation numbers. On revenue bit, that argument to increase tax on wealth Nigerians could work. However, I would also look at a lot of low-hanging fruits. So take, for instance, globally, digital trade services increased by 15% and has also topped the rank of global trade across board, across nations. So, and if you just suppose that what we have in Nigeria, 38% of SMEs, over the bar of at least 18% are currently trading services. 56% of the Nigerian economy is currently a service-based economy, but we don't have a national service policy. And these service-based engagements are already happening. Lots of Nigerian young people are already earning in hard currency. So you want to think of how to quickly organize that market so that they can be an FX pool to raise revenue and also to attract more talent within that space and make the most of the rise of digital-led exports, and also supporting lots of MSMEs who are in non-oil spaces and who are export-ready but cannot find markets. Mm-hmm. So how can you begin to push these low-hanging fruits out there to raise finance? Because it's a revenue mobilization problem, and also being able to take a percentage of that revenue and tailor them to very intelligent social intervention programs that will reduce the cost of living impact. You cannot take out social intervention programs from the future of the cost of living crisis. All right, to create that relief that Nigeria needs will be some very intelligent mix of social intervention policies, not just a 5 billion palliative program that you have on board.
Okay, so this conversation started with the fact that we're hearing that foreign suppliers are now rejecting letters of credit from Nigeria. And this comes to, in all honesty, it really shouldn't come too much as a surprise eventually with all the steps or the depreciation of things as they've happened. But this is all tied to forex. So let's get to that right now. In late August, JP Morgan estimated that the CBN's net FX reserves fell to 3.7 billion at the end of 2022 compared to 14 billion in 2021. Now, Hassan Mahmoud, Director of Monetary Policy Department at the CBN, in reaction said that fluctuations, liabilities, even encumbrances to the reserves were only natural and normal. And the CBN said that Nigeria has over $33 billion in foreign reserves. Now, with the backlog and the current state of things, do we really feel like a country that has some $33 billion in reserves? Because really, some would ask, what's the essence of this foreign reserve if it can't be used and it can't be monetized, let's even say that, in a critical time like we're facing right now?
Yeah, the excess reserves are for the rainy day to start with, but then you don't build economic interventions from reserves. You only go to reserves when it's really, really bad and there's no way out. And again, the way out, technically, I've spoken to in the previous question, would have been the way out if it was executed earlier, because these are options that were on the table even down to the past previous administrations. All right, but right now we are having to talk about reserves because we've not been able to really unlock our low-hanging fruits to start with, and all that. So it's quite a very, very sensitive positioning, and there'll be more risks down the line. So we actually stand the risk of depleting reserves further down or extending our borrowing portfolio just to take care of some of the challenges we are faced with right now. However, there is also a need to tackle those challenges to start with and also execute your low-hanging fruits very quickly so that we're not back to this position and then you also have that institutionally speaking, you're getting the right results going forward into the future. So it's a very, very sensitive and complex situation, but it looks as though there is no option than to go further into some of these sensitive areas that we don't want to talk about, or even have to find bailouts from.
Bailouts from the federal. Okay. Final, before I let you go, Gospel. So Yemi Cardoso, he is now the governor of the CBN. He pledged to improve transparency, fix corporate governance, even restore diminished confidence in the autonomy and integrity of the central bank, and also said that his top priority would be dealing with this FX issue. We know his background. We know how the president, of course, brought him in. He was with the president when he was a governor of Lagos State, 2 terms that it was, of course. But when we look at the things he's promised to do, given how bad the management of the CBN has been in recent times, how much difficulty do you think he's going to have? You've mentioned the collaboration with the CBN, of course, and the Ministry of Finance, as it may be, having to work together, that he can't be the only one spearheading this. This has to be a deliberate and cohesive plan for all. But how soon do you think we might start to see some changes in monetary policy and the necessary effects and consequences in the economy? Gospel, are you still with me? All right, so unfortunately, it looks like technical loss there with my guest, Gospel Obele, the chief economist for Streetnomics, wanting to get into the final question, which is looking at Dr. Yemi Cardoso, who is now the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. He promised to improve transparency, fix corporate governance, and also restore diminished confidence in the autonomy and integrity of the central bank. But he also said this while he was being screened by the Senate, given his nomination by President Tinubu to become CBN governor. He said his top priority would be addressing the backlog, the FX situation that Nigeria faces currently, and that priority is one that many hope he will be able to take to task on and do what he has promised to achieve, as we're now hearing that foreign suppliers are denying Nigerian businesses what they want, because the letters of credits are no longer being trusted. Now, Nigerian businesses are being asked to transfer cash into escrow accounts rather than taking these letters of credit, which basically means that the foreign buyer's bank will pay once the exporter ships the goods and presents the required documentation at the exporter's bank as proof. Reports say that the Central Bank of Nigeria has not paid any forward contracts since February 2023. So I don't know if Gospel's back with me. I'd love to get his thoughts on this final question before we wrap up this conversation. Gospel, all right, so I laid out all of the things that Yemi Cardoso said he wants to do when he was being screened, and I know you probably paid attention to that. But how long do you think before we see some of the positive consequences from what the Central Bank of Nigeria governor has promised all of us? He has promised the Senate, promised the president, and most importantly, he has promised Nigerians. If he's able to do what he wants to do and what he plans to do, how long do you think it'll take before we start seeing some good effects? Gospel, I think you're muted. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, that length of time is strongly dependent on the level of collaboration the central bank has with the fiscal authorities. The reason I say that is because if they decide to go on that journey alone without the necessary collaboration dynamics with the fiscal authority, it may take a longer time. It may take a longer time because part of Nigeria's reality right now when it comes to monetary issues are driven fundamentally by structural and fiscal policy reform deficits, safe to say, or bad policy choices from fiscal authorities in the past. And I mean past, even up until previous weeks or months before now. All right, so the idea would be having that strong collaboration where you have the technicalities moving into it, communication of policies moving into it, and then the pasting of policies. So you don't have a contradictory or incoherent policy rollout. So where you have the central bank governor trying to roll out a policy that could really be of high impact, but it's counterproductive by a policy being rolled out probably by a minister in a particular sector that could impact on the overall outlook of the economy. So, the future of monetary policy in Nigeria is hinged heavily on the collaboration dynamics across technicals, communications, and execution or implementation of policies as we go on. So it's not, we can get all of these things achieved in 6 months, we can get it achieved in 1 year, or it may take the whole of the administration time to achieve them. It's very, very hinged on the collaboration dynamics I talked about.
All right, Gospel, we'll leave it at that. I know there's a situation, as I said earlier, we're not sure how widespread it is right now and if it's something we can call a trend, but it's something we'll be watching very closely because of the knockdown effects on the economy as well as on Nigerians. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Tolu.
As always. All right, so we have international business headlines coming up, but after that, another conversation that looks at the NGX. It looks like there's been some interesting appreciation and trends happening there, so let's keep an eye there. But that will come up after the break.